What's the ideal blog post length when it comes to SEO?
I'm cautious to say the length doesn't matter, because if you want your piece of content to rank well, you have to make it the best it can be. You should never publish a blog post or any web page really without some sort of rich media. I think the easiest is
SEO a stressful job?
Good SEO helps our content be more findable, and then it helps satisfy a need that somebody has. And the human element is unreplaceable and so important to have. Not writing for a search engine, write for humans. Search engines aren't the ones that are consuming your content. They're crawling it and indexing it. Content's not useful if humans aren't using it.
How should a page technically be structured to make sure that you're optimizing for SEO and user experience?
If the person can't navigate the page, they can't find the content that they're looking for, they're having a bad user experience. If you just destroy that content and dilute it with ads, you're not creating a good user experience. One of the most common things that is overlooked is...
Welcome to SEO Gurus. In today's episode, we welcome Sam Hollingsworth. Sam is an upstate New Yorker who previously worked in New York City and Boston for award-winning marketing agencies that have impacted not just their customers, but also their team members. He now leads marketing efforts for PY Digital Marketing. Sam has been executing SEO strategies for a variety of clients for 15 years and is passionate about social media marketing, content creation and marketing, and of course, account management. He is also a freelance writer for multiple online and print publications. This episode is brought to you by GHA Marketing, and we hope you'll enjoy our conversation with Sam. So, Sam, what are the boxes to tick to make a great SEO optimized piece of content? Talk to me like, maybe not like I'm 5 years old, but 7 years old. I don't know much about SEO. How do I do?
I think the most important thing that many people get wrong is they try to cover too much with too little. So they really don't stay focused. They cover a lot of different ideas and topics, and that's not completely impossible to do, but it certainly is tougher to do, and organization becomes incredibly more important at that point. The biggest thing I would say is stick to the point, cover everything that's relevant to the topic, and obviously include those important keywords and points that need to be addressed to properly cover it. So, of course, you want to keep SEO in mind, but it certainly is not the reason that you're making the content, right? You're making the content to satisfy someone's potential need, question, and you want to make sure that you do that in a way that makes sense to them, but also is to the point. Don't be redundant. Don't, try to hit a certain number of words or even keywords. Write naturally, write for your audience, and that should be the beacon for what you're really working on. Now, in terms of the boxes you want to tick to kind of make sure that you're covering all your bases from an SEO standpoint as well as from a content standpoint, you really want to make sure that you understand who your audience is, much like you just addressed. Talk to me like I'm 5 years old, or talk to me like I'm 7 years old, not like I'm 5 years old. I think that's really important. If you're writing content for a marketing blog, you have to have an understanding of the level of knowledge that the readers are going to have. If you're writing for a local community blog or website, you have to understand these people are going to be more familiar with the area, maybe their level of knowledge, maybe, obviously it could be read by children and adults alike, so it has to be, obviously appropriate. Knowing the audience is going to be, a critical step in developing everything from the way that you speak to the topics that you cover, and ultimately how long it may be, whether it includes video, audio, images, etc. All those things are really going to be dictated by the content and the audience. Another box that you really want to make sure that you're checking off is, the obvious things like make sure that it's indexable, make sure it's crawlable, make sure that you have a optimized title, metadata, etc. And I think something else that really gets overlooked is the organization and the structure of the page. It's so easy to just regurgitate thoughts, throw them on a page, do a little keyword research, and call it a day. But it goes so much deeper than that, especially with the way that search engines work and the way people digest information. So many blogs that I read for huge brands, little brands, they just have huge blocks of text on a page. Of course, the information is good plenty of times, but in so many instances, it's hard to locate the information you need. Obviously, Google is pretty good at it since it's crawling millions and millions of pages a day, and it's able to archive these, and it's been doing this for a long time. But when humans are scanning, a 700 word article on their phone, it can be extremely hard not only to follow along and retain information, but just to be mindful of where they are in the article and not losing their place. All these things are really important when it comes to creating good content. And then, of course, ultimately, it's the content that you create. You can't create good content if you don't have extensive knowledge on the topic. If you don't spend a lot of time understanding what you're creating, you really have to immerse yourself in these ideas and speak to them as an experienced person.
So, lot to unpack here, which is amazing. First thing that you mentioned is stay focused. And here my question is, what's the right level of focus? Because when I'm thinking about, hey, I have a website about podcasting, right? And if I want to talk about podcast microphones, well, of course I want to focus the thing on microphones, right? But how focused should I be? Should I only talk about microphones? Or should I mention that, yeah, microphone is super important, but actually if you want the sound to be properly isolated, you should have a headset as well. Microphone isn't of great use if it's not at the right distance from your mouth. So having I don't even know how to call this in English, but if people watching the video right now, the thing that allows you to move the microphone around the place. So I think my question here is, what's the right level of focus that you should have? Because whilst I understand you can go too broad, if you stay too narrow, do you really give enough context in the article for it to be a good piece of content?
Yeah, I would hate to misguide the audience, because it's certainly a good point, right? Like, I think when I say stay focused, I just really mean that you want to stay relevant to the topic at hand. I think what you just mentioned with the microphone example was some great opening points. Like, I think anyone who's searching for a podcast microphone, maybe they're just starting out their first podcast ever and they're looking for basic information. All the things that you just led up with are super useful, right? Like, without, the headset is something to consider. Even if your article is strictly for podcasts that aren't using headsets, it's still worth mentioning that headsets are a viable option, and they may even be a better option. And then the obvious thing to do with that is to also create an article about headsets and then internally link that from the blog or the content we're speaking of now. But I do think that it's important when you're talking about microphones to stay to the topic. Listicles really do well, especially in this type of scenario where you say something like the 9 best microphones for podcasting or something along those lines. And then you literally get to go down and give a list. It probably makes the most sense to rank them in order, but a lot of people, especially when it's unbiased, unpaid content, usually just give a list in alphabetical or no proper ideal order. But I think it's important to remember what you're talking about. Keep that title or that headline in mind the whole entire time, because once you start getting skewed from that allows you to do multiple things, right? Stay in your lane and be mindful of what you're talking about. But also, you can literally keep a running list next to you. And as you start to branch off and kind of get off topic, those are potential next ideas for more good content that people may have questions about.
Love that. Another thing that you mentioned was write naturally. And I would like to dig down a little bit on this point, because in an era where you can have an article written in milliseconds via an artificial intelligence, is that what you mean with write naturally, or what does that encompasses exactly?
No, actually, it means quite the opposite, right? So I think it's pretty easy for most people to tell when an article was written by AI, right? Like if someone is just regurgitating, copy and pasting it, not giving it any human attention, not really, not only editing for accuracy or errors, but just to sound like a human and not a robot, I think that's pretty obvious. Of course, there are examples out there that you're like, oh, that could have got by somebody. It doesn't seem like it was written by AI. But in my opinion, you're always going to need a human element into anything that's going published on the web. You can't just expect a computer to get it right all the time. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about all of this AI transformative type of things that are going on in the world over the last year or two. So many people, myself included, will use AI to help generate ideas. Maybe if you have a bit of a writer's block, they kind of get you going. But I'm never going to just copy and paste what they're telling me and put it on there. Not to mention, it may be a bit of a tooting my own horn, but I do think I could write better than AI a lot of these times because I know my audience much better than a computer is. Now, of course, I could always give it a super high tech, progressive prompt where I nail down the audience to a T. But again, the human element is unreplaceable and so important to have. So when I say write naturally, I'm talking about not writing for a search engine, write for humans. Search engines aren't the ones that are consuming your content. They're crawling it and indexing it, but they're not the ones that are reading it and digesting it. This is for humans. And humans are the ones that, are going to be the ones searching for the content you created. They're going to be the one engaging with it, spending the time on the page, sharing it on social media, etc. And let's be honest, content's not useful if humans aren't using it. So when I say write natural, I mean write for your audience, write for human beings. Don't write for search engines. Make sure that, of course, you're including those critical SEO elements like an optimized metadata, and make sure obviously you're including keywords, right? You can't. It's not possible to write a good piece of content, whether it's a landing page on your website or a blog page on your website or anything else, if you don't use the keywords that are relevant to topic. So you can't talk about microphones and not say the word microphone in the entire article. I think that goes without saying, especially in 2024. But you'd be surprised, or maybe people in the audience, maybe not so much you, Guillaume, but I think some people in the audience may be surprised how often that actually happens. Someone will have a piece of content in the word microphone, in the article, using our example about their microphones. The article may not say the word microphone until the 10th paragraph. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Obviously, you want to have that keyword. In this example, microphone is going to be in your metadata. It's going to be in your title tag. It's going to be in your H1 and probably your other headers as well. And it's going to be in the first or second paragraph as well.
Yeah. Oh, that makes 100% sense. Speaking about keywords, how do you actually do keyword research? Because that's so far, I think it's something around 10 episodes that we've recorded so far. We haven't dig down really into keyword research. So I'm interested to understanding your take on this, Sam. And if we can continue with the microphone example, for instance, what type of keyword research should I be doing if I want to be writing about microphones for podcasting? What does that typically take into account?
The first thing I always do, and this is probably and most likely is very much the journalist in me. I studied journalism and writing in college. I worked in newspapers and magazines for much of my early professional career, and I still do a lot of freelance work. So I do think that it's kind of that journalism mindset, kind of like what I said earlier about immersing yourself in these topics. You can't write or speak about something as not even an expert, just as someone who knows what they're talking about if you don't know what you're talking about. So I do think that's pretty important.
So the question was around how to do an efficient keyword research. Like, what does it mean to do keyword research? And we're taking the example of microphone as well. So how would you typically recommend doing that?
Thanks for reminding me. It's still early here in New York. So again, like I go back to like kind of how I've always got my mind right and prepared for things. A simple Google search. I wouldn't so much consider that keyword research as it is just research, maybe market research, maybe competitive research, but it's research. I want to know what's out there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the keyword phrases or terms that I think I would use to find things. And then, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. But then I usually will see, that's how I'll find out what some of the most searched terms are. Because, Google is able to take my search, I say like something like podcast microphones and search for it in Google, that's probably going to be a pretty valuable keyword, but you're probably going to have a lot of more granular type keywords, like, tabletop podcast microphone, or cheap podcast microphone, or expensive, or best quality. So I think those things are all worth considering. Once I have a pretty good idea of the keyword sets and the topics and the ideas that I think are most relevant to my audience and the piece of content that I'm trying to create, then I'll usually use an actual keyword research tool just for my own knowledge to get an idea for search volume, kind of the way that Google looks at it. A lot of times, and I do still use Keyword Planner. I do think it's a good starting point. There are so many different keyword research tools out there that are great that I couldn't even start to name them. But I do, and I am a bit old school. I've been doing SEO for quite a while. I do think that there's quite a bit of quality data on Keyword Planner. Of course, we all know that it's not 100% accurate, but I have had better luck with some of the other third-party tools, and I do have better outcomes, especially when in client relationships, when I refer to the fact that I use a Google tool. It's not a third-party tool. I can't tell them that the data is 100% true or false, but I can tell them that Google supplied me the data. It's the same data everyone else has available to them if they hit that minimum AdWords spend, of course. But I do think that's another kind of my natural next step. So Google is the place that I start for both those things, right? Google search, traditional Google search that anybody could use. And then, of course, I dive in a bit more with Keyword Planner. And then I really start to take it a step deeper, right? And I like to click through the results that show up in search. I like to use some of the keyword ideas that Google Keyword Planner offers to me. I put them in search and kind of see what the results look like there. I think, again, it goes obviously beyond just keyword research, but I'm sure it could be rolled up into it somehow. But it's like, if I don't understand how Google perceives the intent of a certain keyword or keyword topic is, it's going to be a lot harder for me to understand what's going to work best for my audience, and also for me to rank. So if I use a keyword phrase around like the best podcast microphone, Google's going to think that the intent is I'm looking for the best one, so they're probably going to want to serve a review site with a list of the 10 best ones, or maybe the 5 most affordable options and things like that. If I'm looking to show my expertise and really, as a podcaster, and help my audience understand the many different aspects of these microphones, then that's going to be much more subjective. It's going to be, the intent is much more top of funnel discovery. Whereas, when you're looking at the best microphone, you're already pretty much making your way toward that transaction. You're at least navigational, if not transactional. And then, of course, something like buy the best microphone or buy a podcast microphone, that's going to be super transactional. So obviously SEO tends to be top of funnel, not always. But, you have to really understand the level of intent, and you have to consider what Google is going to be, what Google is going to tend to serve from an intent standpoint. So the main keyword is going to be podcast microphone, or maybe just microphone, but all those modifiers on that keyword, like the best, or buy one, or cheapest, or best sound quality, et cetera, those are all really going to help drive the intent from Google's standpoint.
And that makes 100% sense. So to tackle one of the points that I don't think we spend a lot of time on, except for you mentioning it at the beginning, which is interesting actually. But so what's the ideal blog post length when it comes to SEO? And actually, let me nuance this question a bit. Should it be even a question? And should the question involve SEO? Like when we think about blog post length, when we think about blog posts, should length be a concern at all, or that shouldn't be something that we think about? I'm a bit biased in asking the question, but I guess you will make the most out of this, Sam.
Yeah, so I'm cautious to say the length doesn't matter, because that's how I would tell you or another marketer who would have a pretty good understanding that you're not going to have a blog post or even a landing page or a service page that has, 12 words on it. it's very hard for Google to understand what the page has, but it's also really hard for a human to understand it, especially when it's something as critical as a service page or something on your website. But we are talking about blogs, so I'll stick to the topic at hand. I think that at the very least, your blog should be at least 300 words, but I hate to put a number like that on it. There's so many third-party tools that will call out thin content, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's incorrect. The truth is, you want to take as much space as you need to properly cover the topic at hand. You want to make sure your piece of content is the best it can be, and you have to use however many words you have to use to do it. I do think there's a lot of research out there that covers the topics of, words per article, and the more keywords, a lot of times the better it does, and that's usually just because those articles are more thoroughly explained. They have much more sourcing, citations, statistics, credibility. I mean, there's a reason why in-depth white papers that are 50-page PDFs rank extremely well, and that's because they're usually highly researched. They're highly regarded because of that. They're not written overnight. They're not even written in a week usually, right? These are written over months because they have a lot of time, energy, research, analysis that go into them. So some of the best content is going to naturally be super long. Now, when we're talking about a basic blog post, sticking with our microphone example, I can't imagine a blog post about the 10 best podcast microphones or the 10 best quality or the 10 most affordable. I can't imagine that article being any less than 500 words, just given the fact that you have 10 items in your list. That's breaking down. I'm not great at math, but I can tell you that breaking it down, 500 words, 10 items in the list, you're looking at about 50 words per, and then you're going to have an opening and a conclusion. So you're really working with less than 50 words per item. So, that's going to take you more than 50 words per item most times to cover that. So I think too often people put way too much weight on the number of keywords on a page. I've worked with even SEOs and content people, and I've trained, analysts coming into the SEO world at an early stage in their career who say, XYZ, whatever the platform may be, I don't want to call anybody out because it's not really wrong, but they'll say, this audit tool told me that this content is not good enough or it's too short, and then I look at it and it's actually not that bad. I think, especially for me, doing this for as long as I have, I can open up a blog post and look at it and say, this is not going to be long enough, because you can usually tell. I mean, if you can fit all the words on the screen without scrolling, it's probably not long enough. You're probably not covering all the topics sufficiently. There's probably other content out there that covers the same topic better than you because it's more in depth. So you have to be thorough. You have to be complete. If you want your piece of content to rank well, you have to make it the best it can be, because let's be honest, you're going to have no other piece of content on your website is going to be exactly like that one. If they're targeting the same keyword sets, they're going to compete against each other and cannibalize each other. So you want that one piece of content that is the 10 best podcasting microphones for home use or something like that. Like, you want to make sure you're covering the 10 best and you're doing it efficiently and you're including all the points that somebody searching for that, your audience, would care about. Hope I properly covered it enough. I can't drive home enough that the number of keywords should not matter. The number of words should not matter, right? Like, again, as an ex-journalist, I know, and I still write for plenty of publications, newspapers included. They will tell you, write this article around 500 words. I'll tell you right now, they don't do that for Google. They do that because it's space in the print and paper. So these are two completely different things. And when it comes to writing for publications like that, you do have to be super mindful of word count. When you're talking about your website, your blog, there's no limit on what you can do. That being said, I'm not telling everybody to go out there and write a 3,000 word article about the 10 best podcasting microphones, because I'll tell you right now, people aren't going to get past number 3. You want to be able to make sure that the content is easily findable, easily readable, easily digestible, and people will retain it when it is well written, concise, to the point, and holds real value.
I don't remember what's the exact number, but our brain processes images, I think it's multiple thousand folds faster than words, than text. I think you've done quite some work around visual assets in pieces of content, Sam. So what's the typical recommendation here when it comes to visual assets in pieces of content? Would you have a certain number of images per word? Do you want to have graphics supporting your pieces of written content? How do you typically view this? Hey, if you're still listening to this, you probably find this conversation interesting, and that means that others might too. So the best way you can support this podcast for free is to leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this show. This helps the podcast more than I could say. It means other SEOs can learn and get access to our amazing guests, and that will mean the world to me. All right, with that being said, back to the episode.
So again, we're going to go back to my my opening point, and that's keep the audience in mind, right? What's best for the audience? If you are writing a blog post about sticking with the microphone example, you know what's going to be super helpful? An example of a soundbite from all 10 microphones. So that's going to be an audio component, right? That's a completely different piece of rich media. Just like when you're talking about beautiful paintings or a paint color in your interior. I mean, think about how hard it would be to describe those things to somebody when you have the ability to just have a picture as well. Of course, you want to talk to it, you want to speak to it, you want to include those keywords, and you want to really offer good written content. But all good written content, the best written content, is supplemented with visuals. There's a lot to unpack in terms of this idea, but I'll tell you, one of the most basic guideline that I have always operated on, and a lot of the online publications that I write for operated within a similar, guideline, is you have to have at least one good high quality image with your article. It's going to help click-through rate in search. It's going to help Google understand that you have an image with it. Google is far more likely, because it's pretty much impossible to get listed in Google Discover without an image. So Google Discover is a great tool that's kind of like just supplementary visits that your website can generate by having good content. But if the content could be excellent written content, but if there's no image, it's not going to show up in Google Discover. So that's kind of a good basis just to know. You should never publish a blog post or any web page really without some sort of rich media. I think the easiest is an image, just because even if you have a video and you have these audio bits on there, kind of showing the sample of their microphone, an image of you with the microphone or a microphone in front of you is going to be a good way for a person to understand what the article was about, that there is enough, I guess, focus or on the fact that there is an image. Like there's countless studies about the fact that images and rich media in your online content does increase click-through and engagement, and that can't really be a surprise. I mean, it's just like, I always think when I was a kid and I would read through a newspaper or a magazine, I would always stop on the articles that had pictures because, let's be honest, when you're growing up, like, reading isn't the most thrilling thing for a lot of people. It's kind of the same thing, right? Like you want good visuals to kind of grab people's attention, and if you have them at your disposal, you can use them as much as you need. I just don't understand why you wouldn't do that. Of course, there are some things to be mindful of, like you don't want to load, you don't want to have, a dozen or 15 huge high quality photos that are going to slow down the page and make it hard to load, and hopefully not get demoted in search because it's so slow and things like that. Obviously, you want to make sure that they're the right sizing, the right quality. You also don't want one that's super blurry, right? You want good visuals. They have to also be relevant. Don't just throw a visual at the top of your blog post because it's not going to show up in Google Discover without one. And let's be honest, how hard is it to get a picture of just a random microphone? You can make it work. if you don't have a great camera or you don't have the ability to do it, we all know there's plenty of, stock photo suppliers out there. Some are free, some are paid. But when it comes to having the best quality content being published, you can't be cheap, you can't be stingy, you can't be lazy. You got to make sure that you're giving yourself the tools necessary to succeed. And that includes rich media, and it definitely includes images. I think even with videos, that they're great to have. I think, I'm kind of going off beyond there's just the images, but videos are super useful. Obviously, they get great engagement. They obviously get added legs on them because, you have the video on YouTube. You're going to show up on YouTube, which is obviously a very popular search engine. And then you embed that video right in your blog post. And, that's going to offer people, whatever the video may be about, it's going to offer people an incredibly detailed insight that they may not be able to get from written content or even a still image. I do still think it's important to have a still image somewhere on that page. That way, when you share the article on Facebook or any other social media platform, that main image is going to be, the thumbnail. Sometimes with videos that works out well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes this still is a nightmare and you can't even make out what it is. Sometimes you get somebody just happen to be speaking in the middle of a word and their face looks funny. So it's like you have the ability to customize things. Why aren't you doing it? You might as well do it. Again, keeping your audience in mind, doing what you think would resonate and grab their attention the best and go from there.
And I have another cheeky question for you, Sam, on this. Actually, it's going to be a kind of a curveball. We're not going to mention any names, but I'm pretty sure you're going to see who I'm talking about. What about ads? A lot of websites will ultimately want to drive traffic towards their website, right? And provide value to customers and users on this website. And the way they would monetize this is just to display ads, right? With Google AdSense or whatsoever. What's the right number of ads for your articles, for your pieces of content, if the main monetization is ads, right? And I know that you're going to refer back to your initial point to all this, which is think who you're writing this for, the end user. But what more? What's your view on it?
Obviously, especially with ads, less is more, right? But we all have to make money, especially when you're creating content for a publishing website, a content network. I mean, ads are going to be your lifeblood for revenue. So I totally understand that it's an important question. Luckily, when I write for publications, I don't have to worry about that because I don't run the publications, I just write for them, so that's pretty helpful. But I do think it's easy to look at plenty of publications out there, some good ones and some not so good ones, that are just covered in ads. Again, as someone who writes for newspapers a lot, especially the newspapers that don't have a paywall, I've opened up countless articles and I can't even find the content I'm trying to read because there's so many pop-ups, there's so many banner ads, there's so much going on that I'll just say I'm either going to go back to Google and just search for the keywords and find a different article, or I'm going to just not read it and just not care about it. So I think you definitely have to be mindful of that. The ad to content ratio, I guess we would call it, but I don't know why you would want to have more than one or two ads on a given page. Most places have it because you got to maximize profitability. But the second you realize, or anyone, maybe you get feedback from readers, the second it is realized that the content on your page is being negatively affected by ads, you have to really reconsider how you're doing things. I do think there are also ways to have your cake and eat it too. I think that you can still generate ad revenue without just pasting banner ads and other types of ads all over a web page. Something that I see commonly, and especially in a lot of the marketing publications that are out there, is they'll have a pop-up, as soon as you visit the website with something major, like maybe a free trial for a third-party tool or a webinar or something along those lines. And while that may be annoying, a user has the choice. Maybe that ad is relevant to them and they would want to read it. That happens to me plenty of times. And maybe they're like, I don't care about that. They can X right out and go to the piece of content they came to visit. And then their experience on the page is not ruined or distorted in any way. I think especially in 2024, we've all become accustomed to ads showing up on good content, especially when it's, unbiased content. That's the nature of the beast. Newspapers have had ads in them since the beginning of time, and that's what makes the world go round. But I do think that you have to be mindful of the user experience. I think even more so in the last 10 years, user experience has really become a larger part of SEO. And I think that, of course, there are usability experts that know far more than me as an SEO about the user experience, and they can teach me things, and they do every day. But I do think that you have to understand and be mindful of the user experience when you're talking about optimizing any page, any website, and the customer experience or the user experience. If the person can't navigate the page, they can't find the content that they're looking for, they're having a bad user experience. Not only are they going to have a bad opinion of the piece of content you wrote, but probably also your domain and your brand. If somebody constantly searches for things that fall in your wheelhouse and your website keeps showing up, and they come to your website from search and they can't find what they're looking for, if that happens more than one time, you're pretty much losing that person's trust forever. You're going to have to go through a site redesign and a complete overhaul the way your content is formatted. And then you have to lure them back in to see that you have changed your ways for them to even give you a chance. So you don't have a long opportunity, a long time to show your value. People have a plethora of content to search through, and they'll find somebody else that gives an answer. Even if the answer isn't as good as yours, it could be second or third or 10th best piece of content that covers the topic. If they can't get to the content on the page because there's ads everywhere, or because it's, just a bad user experience, the page load is too slow, whatever the case may be, you're not going to win the click.
So I love this. And I want to add a bit of a personal opinion on this, because I have a bit of a personal experience on this lately. So as you said, and I couldn't agree more, everybody has to make money, right? At the end of the day, if you have a business model that is not centered around ads, then you're going to put out content that almost doesn't have ad in it, and that's awesome. But with people who do, well, you need to be able to also be at peace with that, right? And I also understand that something you didn't mention, I don't know if it's on purpose or not, Sam, but there is a very wide use of ad block as well, right? So many users, I don't know what percentage it is exactly, but would just have ad block and not see any ads. So basically the ones relying on ads to earn money need to, make up for that loss of people using ad block, whatever. Now, my problem with this is, and it happened to be recently on a website, when the value I get from the article gets compromised from the number of ads. I'm thinking of a website right now, obviously not going to name it, but that was making sure that in the piece of content itself, so I'm not talking about the sidebar, in the piece of content itself, they were making sure that you would always have an ad. And that whether it will come nicely in, or if it will be in the middle of a paragraph, or even a bullet point list. But then you're like, the way you consume that piece of content is compromised, because, it flows much less well. And the next layer is when you start getting annoyed by ads more than you're getting value from the article. And it's just like instant bounce. So I understand it's pretty hard to balance. Obviously, you want to make as much money as possible, but I love the point around, hey, who are you writing for? If the user experience at the end of the day gets compromised because of the number of ads, that's probably not the right way to go. That was for my rant.
No, I mean, I can't agree anymore. I think what you said was, you basically explained my point about user experience, right? All you just described is a poor user experience, which is going to result in what we said. And to be fair, I don't think publications need to make as much money as possible. You got to make some money, but the second you try to maximize your profitability on, your content, or maybe you have one really good article that gets millions of views a year or whatever, if you just destroy that content and dilute it with ads, you're not creating a good user experience, and you're kind of just being greedy. You don't need to make as much money as possible. Just make some money, pay the bills, make some money, but you don't have to make the most money possible.
One thing we didn't discuss in depth yet, Sam, is the structure of the page and kind of the technical aspects of SEO. So here, I know there is a lot to be talked about when it comes to website or technical optimization, right? Here, I'm more interested into the page itself. I think you mentioned a few things. Metadata, making sure to have the right H1, so the right title, having the right structure. What else can you tell us about the layout of the text on the screen, for instance? I don't know, the breakers between the paragraph. Like, how should a page should technically be structured to make sure that you're optimizing for SEO and user experience?
So yeah, I think that's another one that's overlooked a lot, especially by a lot of the big enterprise level brands that I work with every day. Especially the ones that are super technical. There's a lot of industry speak and jargon, and that's good. Those are the keywords that are going to resonate with the right audience. But what is tough, even if they're consuming the content on a desktop device or a mobile device, especially, or a tablet or anything else, like you don't want to have these huge blocks of text. It not only does it hurt the eyes and is it like impossible to follow along with, it's not a good user experience. When you create a piece of content that's 500 words or 1,000 words, even if it's, let's stick with the listicle approach for the microphones, 10 best microphones for a podcast or 10 most affordable, whatever it may be. You're obviously going to have that article broken out with a headline, something along the lines of the 10, best podcasting microphones, but you're also going to have a list of 10, and you're going to actually have those numbered lists. Numbered lists are just like bullets. Those are something that you should always try to use when you have the opportunity to do so. It's way more easy for a human to digest it, understand it. It's even easier for a search engine to index it and call it out and serve it in search. So I think, using that sort of structured element is going to be important. When you're working with that listicle topic, format, you're going to have, one, and then the microphone name, you're going to have a summary of and the pros and cons below it. You're going to have two, so not only does it allow a search engine to kind of break these articles up into components, but it helps humans. And that's, again, who we care about here. It allows humans to follow along. It allows them to read it a lot easier, especially we know the high percentage of users that are using phones, especially to consume their content daily. Of course, these statistics fluctuate based on the industry and things like that, and the target audience, etc. But it doesn't, there's always going to be people consuming content on a mobile device. And when you're breaking it up with bullets, line breaks, etc., you're going to be serving your user much, much better than if you just plop on, long paragraphs like you're writing War and Peace or one of these old school, awesome books that it's just frankly a different piece of literature. Books are made to be consumed that way. There's very few, amazing, books, actual tangible books that have photos at all. So we're talking about much different things. The web is not the same experience as an amazing piece of writing that we studied in high school or college or something like that. These are pieces of content on the web that serve a very specific purpose, right? It's to educate your audience, but also to offer them as much relevant details and content around these topics. That's why visuals are so important. That's why, when talking about the microphone example, having sound bites from the microphone is going to be so useful because it's going to let somebody understand and really hear what it sounds like. And they're going to have a much better idea of the value when they have that real example. It's just like when, they have like those cooking competitions and people, you have 10 groups of people that make cupcakes. You don't just look at them. You don't just smell them. You taste them. You eat them. You want to have an experience with what it's like to pick it up, put it in your mouth, what the aftertaste is like. All those things are important to the experience, just like when you're educating somebody about what the best microphone is. I do think one of the most common things that is overlooked is the line breaks, whether it's, the return key, whatever you want to call it. Having the break between paragraphs is incredibly important to have, especially that mobile device content, easy to read, easy to digest. The basic rule of thumb that I have learned over the years and I have seen as a tried and true kind of guideline is you only need about one sentence per paragraph. There are going to be some paragraphs that are 2 sentences. There may even be some that are 3 sentences because they're shorter. But, it's going to be very rare that a piece of blog content, especially something as, quick hit as the 10 best podcast microphones, are going to need that. They're going to need that.
No, I definitely like the sound bites idea for the podcast microphones article. Sam, I want to start a new tradition as of this very episode with you. I want to take the main question that we tackle together, ask it to Google, and then look at what people also ask the search feature of Google and ask you those questions. Obviously, so I'm going to ask you 3. I'm not going to ask you the ones that we've already covered, which is luckily or rightfully so, things we've already covered for plenty of those questions. But I have 3 questions here that I think are interesting, and I kind of can summarize a bit what we discussed as well. The first one I want to ask you is SEO content writing difficult?
Well, if it was easy, everyone would do it, right? And everyone would rank well. I do think I have been maybe not lucky, but I think that my choice in education and my career path, I certainly have a strong background in writing, so that allows me to think like a reporter since I was trained to be one. When you are a reporter in the journalism world and you are writing stories, you can't write any story, any good story, any legitimate story, any respectable story without properly sourcing people who have an expert opinion or a first-hand detail account of what's going on here. So the same idea is relevant here. That's why we have backlinks. That's why you externally link out to, the proprietary source or the publisher of the original statistic or the company that makes the microphone. If you don't have those links in your article, it's a lot harder not only for people to, understand what you're talking about or to get a better idea of the product that you're referring to. If there isn't a link, what are they going to do then? They're going to go back to Google and they're going to copy and paste the name of the microphone into Google, and then they're going to probably not come back to your website because they're going to have 15 tabs open and they're not going to come back. So, you obviously want to have those links. You obviously want to have them open in a new window or a new tab rather. That way you're not losing the user on the page. And I think that those things that's obviously very important to keep in mind. Credibility doesn't come just because you have used 10 microphones. You have to be able to, show those examples, whether it's an audio bit, whether it's, sending it back to the brand website and reading a case study about how the microphone technology is different than other, whatever the case may be. You have to, really prop up those value propositions and show what things are worth. And that's how you do that. And I just want to, kind of come full circle on your first question or first point. When you mentioned the Google feature, people also ask, that is a big part of my keyword research that you asked about earlier on. When I use the Google search as a starting place, it's not only the results that are there and the intent and things like that. It is also what is relevant to this topic. What sort of knowledge panel breakout, if any, is showing up? What sort of brands are showing up and people also search for? And then of course people also asked, you can get a good idea of the long tail searches around your more broad stroke topic because people are constantly asking it, and Google is literally regurgitating it to you so that you can understand the other ideas and topics that are relevant to that. And then of course, Google autocomplete could even be a helpful, free, pretty easy to use tool that you're able to help with keyword research. You type in microphone or podcast microphone in Google search, Google will add a couple other keywords at the end of that will give you more idea and more direction of what people may be searching for. So sorry to get off topic, but I think it's important to kind of rehash that from a keyword research standpoint. I think I said earlier, the keyword research topic in conversation could go on for hours because it is so, there's so many tools, there's so many ways to go about it, there's so many things that you may find or that you may need, and there's a million different ways to get them.
No need to be sorry at all, Sam. I think this is gold. Next question. Is SEO a stressful job?
I mean, again, if it wasn't, everyone would do it, right? No, I mean, I think like everything in life, working in SEO, and everything that we do, attitude, it goes a long way, and it really is everything. Of course, there are going to be stressful moments in work, whether it's SEO or whether you're driving a bus or whether you're a basketball player. You know, like they're going to be stressed out, or you're going to have stress, and you're going to face stress. But it's really how we deal with these things. Adversity builds character. It also builds resilience, and it also, the strongest people, get over those hurdles without faltering too much. So, is there going to be stress involved in an SEO, field? Of course. But same thing with any job. I do think the attitude is everything. And I also think, preparation is key, just like anything else we do. And I do think, knowledge is power. I learn something new every day. Most times, probably all times, it's more than one thing a day. Collaboration is key. Learning from your peers, learning from your mentors, learning from people that you're training. These things are all very much a part of what we do every day. And I think, sticking to the SEO field specifically, I think if it wasn't the way it is, I wouldn't do it. I love that it's fast-paced. I love that you could have an awesome opportunity at a agency that works with huge companies, or you can have something that you love in-house for a little mom and pop. You could work anywhere in the world with a lot of companies in terms of SEO. Everyone has their specialties. Obviously, I have a strong background in content, but technical, really helps really makes the SEO world go round. So you have to have that component. And then, of course, there is the usability, the on-page. There's so many elements to SEO that are, critical to the overall performance and output. But I think people have their different niches and different aspects that they're good at. That's a long-winded answer, but I do love being an SEO. You have the ability to do a lot of different things that could be qualified as SEO, but it's really, life is what you make it, and so is a role in SEO. Attitude is everything, and if you're not happy, then maybe it's not for you. But you're going to have some ups and downs. If there are ups and downs, it's not real life.
Last one. Is SEO writing profitable?
I think that it's a good question, but I think it's the wrong question. You know what I mean? Because it kind of goes back to the thing with the ads and like trying to make the most money. Like, you're in it for the wrong reasons. If you're in it for the wrong reasons, it's not impossible to succeed. It's not impossible to have to build a strong following. It's not going to be impossible to rank well. It's not going to be impossible to make money. But you're kind of probably missing the big picture. I think plenty of people start websites and build blogs to make money. That's okay, but you're not going to serve your audience well if you're not thinking of that first. You have to be able to know what you're talking about, speak to it well, illustrate it well, communicate it well is probably the best way to put it. And you have to be in it to really offer knowledge, improve people's lives, whether it's simplifying a task, speeding up a task, whatever the case may be. There's a greater purpose for SEO and good content than just making money, and that's probably ultimately the end of the day. We're all trying to make some sort of money in life. It's, it's how we live, right? But we're not thinking about SEO to be profitable. At least we shouldn't be. We should think that, okay, good SEO is going to help our profits. Good SEO is going to help our content perform better. But the real goal is good SEO helps our content be more findable, and then it helps satisfy a need that somebody has. That's really what the content does. SEO is the vehicle that helps make it happen.
Hey, thank you so much for making it to the end. For more content updates, visit our website at ghapodcast.com, and don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn for more tips and insights on SEO. See you in the next episode.